Alright, we've got 4.4 notes, which is going to be over X and Y intercepts. Many of you have heard of an interception in football. That's where the other team takes away the ball. Well, we want to find out where X and Y cross the line. So that's kind of the interception connection here. If I want to look at the we want to identify the X and Y intercepts from the graphs. Alright, so I'm going to find my X axis, and I want to follow along my X axis until I hit the line. When I hit the line, that is my X intercept. So my line intercepts my X axis at this point. Okay, and at this point, I am at 3, 0. So we do want to write that as an ordered pair. That is my X intercept. Okay, then I want to do the same thing, except I want to go along my y-axis. So if I'm going along my y-axis, I want to see where my line crosses the y, and I'm up at this point. My line intercepts my y-axis at 4. So that coordinate point is going to be at 0, 4, and that's my y-intercept. So these are points that the line crosses my x and y axes. Number 2, here's my graph, and I want to see where it crosses my x-axis, and it crosses my x-axis over here at -3, 0. So my x-intercept is going to be -3, 0. And then I want to see where my line crosses my y-axis. And my y-axis is crossing at 0, -3. And that's my y-intercept. So again, it's where my line crosses my x-intercept and my my x-axis and my y-axis, and that's where the line intercepts the axes. It crosses them. Number 3, I want to see where my line crosses my x-axis. It's crossing here, and that looks like it's between 0 and -1, so that would be -1/2, 0. Most of the time, the x and y intercepts are not these nice whole numbers that we see here. They will sometimes be fractions. That's my x-intercept. Then I want to see where it crosses my y-axis, and it's crossing my y-axis here at 0, 5. And that is my y-intercept. Okay, so the x and y intercepts are where the lines cross the x and y axes, and we are picking out those points for the x and y intercepts. One of the other things you'll notice is that the x-intercept always has 0 for y, and the y-intercept always has 0 for x. And that's going to be useful information with us we solve for the x and y intercepts from an equation. Okay. And we'll move on to the next section. I want to be able to see my graphs. Okay, now solving for the x and y intercepts, we won't always have the graphs available. We'll have the equation. This is the standard form of the equation where x and y are on the same side. And what we need to know is if we're finding the x-intercept, that means I'm going to have an x and I'm going to have a 0 for y. So since I know that y value is going to be 0, I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So I'm going to have 3 times 0 plus 4x equals 12. Okay, well 3 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 4x equals 12. And 0 plus 4x is still just 4x equals 12. And then I'm going to divide by 4 to solve for x, and x is going to equal 3. So actually my x-intercept is going to be at 3, 0. Next I want to find my y-intercept. My y-intercept is going to be, if you noticed in our graphs before, I had a 0 for the x and then I had to find the y. So I can put in 0 for the x coordinate here. So I have 3y equals nope, not equals, 4y, 3y, plus 4 times 0, because I'm plugging in 0 for the x, equals 12. 3y plus 0 equals 12. 3y plus 0 is 3y equals 12. We're going to divide by 3, and my y equals 4. So my y coordinate is going to be 4, and these are my x and y intercepts. Now I want to go ahead and bring it back up to the graph, because this first graph is the graph of this first equation. My x-intercept ended up at 3, 0. My y-intercept ended up at 0, 4. Okay, so whenever you're finding your x and y intercepts, you're going to plug in 0 for the opposite variable. Number 5, x plus y equals negative 3. So if I want to find my x-intercept, I want to plug in 0 for y. So for my x-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So I get x plus 0 equals negative 3. Well, x plus 0 is just x, so x equals negative 3. So my x-intercept is going to be negative 3, 0. So when I'm finding my y-intercept, my x is going to equal 0. So now I have 0 plus y equals negative 3. 0 plus y is y. Y equals negative 3. So my coordinate is at 0, negative 3. And again, if we look up at this graph, that is the graph of this equation, where my x-intercept is at negative 3 and my y-intercept is at negative 3 as well. So we're making the connection that whenever the x is 0, that's going to give me my y-intercept, and whenever the y is 0, that's going to give me my x-intercept. Okay, number 6. 10x minus y equals negative 5. When I find my x-intercept, that means I'm going to be plugging in 0 for y. So I get 10x minus 0 equals negative 5. That leaves me with 10x equals negative 5. Divide by 10. And x equals negative 5 tenths. However, I'm going to simplify that. They're both divisible by 5. And that gives me negative 1/2. So my x-intercept is going to be at negative 1/2, 0. My y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for x. X is going to equal 0. So then I get 10 times 0 minus y equals negative 5. That gives me 0 minus y equals negative 5, or negative y equals negative 5. Being that I need a positive y, I'm going to divide by negative 1. That eliminates the negative signs. Negative and negative is positive, making it positive y. And negative makes that positive 5. So my y-intercept is at 0, 5. And again, if we look up at our graph, we can see that that does cross at negative 1/2, the x-intercept, when y is 0. And then it does cross up at positive 5 when x is 0. And those are how we found our x and y intercepts. Number 7, I do not have a graph for. We're not always going to have a graph to go back and look at and check our x and y intercepts. So, for our x-intercept, I'm going to plug in y for 0. So I get 3x minus 0 equals 3. 3x equals 3. Divide by 3. And x equals 1. So our x-intercept is going to be at 1, 0. For my y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for x. So I'm going to have 3 times 0 minus y equals 3. I get 0 minus y equals 3. Negative y equals 3. And because I need a positive y, I'm going to divide by negative 1. That makes it positive y equals negative 3. So that means it's crossing at 0, negative 3. Okay, these are my x and y intercepts for these equations. Our first three equations matched our graphs up here so that you can make a connection between the points on the graph and how we find the x and y intercepts in the equations. Now for our next section. Okay, for each table we're going to identify the x and y intercepts. We want to write the answer as an ordered pair. So we've had different forms of the x and y intercepts. We found them on a graph, we found them through the equation, and now we want to be able to look at a table and decide what the x and y intercepts are. Now if you'll remember from the equation in the table, our x-intercept is when our y equals 0, and our y-intercept is when our x equals 0. So what I really want to do is go look at the table, and I want to look for my x-intercept. So on the table I want to see where y equals 0. So I'm going to go down my table of values and I'm going to find where y equals 0 here. And it's 0 at 3, 0. So that means my x-intercept is going to be 3, 0. That's where it crosses the x-axis at. Now I want to find my y-intercept. So when looking for my y-intercept, I'm looking when x equals 0. So I want to look at my table of values and I want to find out when x is 0, and it's 0 right here at 0, 5. So my y-intercept is going to be at 0, 5. So picking them out of the table should be fairly easy. You want to look and see when your x and y's are 0. So if I look at number 9, and I want to find my x-intercept, I want to know when y is 0. So I'm going to come over and look at my y values, and I see y is 0 here, which means it's going to be vertically, it's going to be -20. So my x-intercept is going to be -20. And then I want to find my y-intercept, and that's going to be when my x is 0. So I want to look at my x values and find out where x is 0, and it's 0 at 0, 4. So my y-intercept is at 0, 4. Number 10, want to find my x-intercept. Again, that's when my y value is 0. So I want to look at my y value and find 0, and I find that value at -5, 0. So my x-intercept is at -5, 0. And I want to find my y-intercept. My y-intercept is when the x is 0, and here's where x is 0. X is 0 at -2. So my y-intercept is at 0, -2. So it's really fairly simple to be able to identify the x and y intercepts out of a table, because you're looking at when each variable is 0. So the x-intercept is when the y is 0. The y-intercept is when the x is 0. Okay, now for some real-world examples. We have our last two. Find the x and y intercepts and give their meanings. Okay, they do have meanings just like slope. So if I want to look at the distance from home, I'm looking and it crosses my y-axis at 0, 400. So my y-intercept is at 0, 400. And my x-intercept looks like it's crossing at 5. So my x-intercept crosses at 5, 0. And what does this mean? Okay, well my y-intercept is my beginning amount. So we're starting we're beginning, I'm going to use beginning because that's going to be what we're going to use a little bit later. We're beginning 400 miles from home. And the x-intercept would be interpreted or given meaning is it takes 5 hours to drive home. Okay, number 12. I see the 0, 15,000. So since x is 0, that means my y-intercept is 15,000. So my y-intercept is at 0, 15,000. And my x-intercept from the table, that's when y is 0, that's at 3, 3, 0. Okay, and the y-intercept means we are beginning with 15,000 gallons of water. And for the x-intercept, that means it takes 3 hours to drain the pool. Okay, so we're really going back and interpreting what that means. The y-intercept is your beginning amount. It's how much you're starting with. So we're beginning 400 miles away from home, or we're beginning with 15,000 gallons of water. And as it goes down to 0, the x-intercept is how long it takes to get down to 0. So it takes 5 hours to drive those 400 miles, or it takes 3 hours to drain those 15,000 gallons of water. And we are now finished with Unit 4A.